Hey guys, in this episode, we're going to talk about problems, and then you have bigger problems, and then you have biggest problems. I guess they never go away. But inherently, we talk about the fact that these problems and how we frame them could be the determining factor whether we actually leave the game completely, stay static in the game, or excel to a new level. Stay tuned. Hey guys, this is Brett Young, Taylor Young, and Rod Erb, and you're tuned in to the Be Extraordinary podcast with Erb and Young. Real conversations about business, leadership, and personal development. Oh man, I got to tell you a funny story, gentlemen. Hey, welcome back, gang. I got Mr. Rod Erb, Mr. Taylor Young in the building today. But I have a confession to make before we get ripping here that I'm not proud of, that I'm embarrassed about. And I'm also embarrassed to say that this wasn't the first time this has happened to me. I'm on the phone this morning, and I'm going through Panera, which I'm on a juice cleanse. So I go, and I forgot that I was on a juice cleanse, first of all. Just go in line. I'm on the phone with Rod, trying to handle some, problem, some situation, some big deal, right? It's what we'll talk about today. It seems like every day is one of these big problems, and I'm in the line and I order, I'm like, oh shoot, I can't do that. All right, so I'll just have a coffee. And then he's on the phone, I'm like, hey, do you want something? So he says he wants something, I order for him. I pull up to the window and, I'm talking to him. She doesn't know if I'm talking to her. I'm distracted. I answer a question that she asks me. I give her my credit card. She runs it. She gives me back the receipt. I get the receipt and I'm like, thank you, have a great day. I proceed to just try to solve the world's problems with Rod on the phone, and I drive away from Panera with none of my stuff.
Did you get your credit card?
You got my credit card. I had my credit card. I drove. Not only did I drive and go, I made it all the way back to the office. All the way back to the office, and I'm getting out of the car to go bring my stuff up to the office, and I'm like, shit, I didn't get any of the stuff that I ordered. So I went to Panera, paid them the money, and then I just drove away. And so I had to go back to them and get in line and, let them know that I wasn't trying to just donate to the Panera cause without receiving any goods. So anyway, that was my morning, gentlemen.
Woo! It's, you don't want to say you've been there because I certainly haven't.
I was going to say, I don't know what that's like. It's kind of like when you show up to the storage unit and
we could give a lot of examples where B. Young has been distracted and just certain things happen that you just shake your head at and go, man, how have you gotten to where you are by being able to be so dumb? And I'd go, I have good partners as my answer, man.
Oh man,
really good partners allow me to be, space cadet sometimes. So. Pretty fun.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for picking up my Panera.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Or I should say thanks for going back and getting it.
You're welcome, man. Well, I don't know. I wanted to kind of ask you guys a couple questions this morning because it's top of mind, obviously, with being distracted to the point in which you would pay for breakfast and then leave and go all the way back to the office and forget it, is that it just seems like every single day there are the big problems that show up, man. And, I remember, just thinking, man, if we could just get to this point, it won't feel like this. These problems will be gone. And then you get to the next point, and then there's just these bigger problems that show up. And then you're like, oh, if I can just get to that, these will be gone, and we won't have to worry about that. Well, then once that's gone, there's bigger problems that show up. And inherently, all that's happened is you just swapped smaller problems for bigger problems. And so I feel like, how, is that frustrating to you guys? Have you ever been in a slump where you can, get poor, pitiful me?
Problem
fatigue, and then, have you ever found yourself thinking, if I could just get to this, I won't have these anymore? And then, I don't know, can you relate to that?
Man, the first thing I think about, and it's funny because we were kind of laughing and joking and kicking things before we came on the air, but I remember, shout out to Jeff Olson, right? Back in the day, Jeff said the size of the leader is determined by the size of the problem you can solve. The size of the paycheck is directly proportionate to the size problem you can solve. And I remember we used to wish for bigger problems because we wanted to make more money.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes, I can relate, man. I've dealt with some problem fatigue here recently. So I can relate. I feel like, I think we talked a couple weeks ago about being professional apologizers.
Yeah.
With one of our friends or colleagues or clients or whoever it was. And I feel like I've kind of been in that mode lately. Certainly, and I'm just reminded that, man, there's just so much to learn. There's so much to learn. Be careful about pretending to be somebody you're not, because there's just so much to learn. And there's, and I don't even, I think in my own reflection, and believe me, there's been a lot of it lately. It's like, I don't even care how good you are, right? You're not immune to problems. You're not immune to mistakes, and you're never immune to something that you just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that what's important to me, and I think what's relevant about the topic, is just, you got to remind yourself of that. Man, I've beat myself up big time over some things that I'm working through professionally, and the intention's great, right? The intention's pure. The intention is
To be better.
Is to serve at a higher level, is to provide more value, is to to create more confidence and more peace of mind. And it seems like for me, I don't feel like the product that we deliver has been watered down, but I think that there's been some problems that I'm dealing with where confidence has gotten a little bit shaky. So it doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that I'm not involved. It doesn't mean that I'm not immersed. It doesn't mean that I'm not in solution mode rather than woe is me and blaming and all this other crap. But yeah, I relate, man. I feel like for me, there's been a few through December and even back a little bit further that I'm still working through. So I guess my long-winded answer is I relate. I relate. And problem fatigue is
Never heard that before. We should coin that. So
yeah,
feel that?
It's real, man. I do feel like I'll be going on a good clip, and then I'll be reminded of what I'm working through or solutions I'm trying to find to certain issues or problems or challenges I'm working through, and it's like, damn.
Or how about another big problem shows up before you're done with the one problem you're trying to fix?
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's undefeated. I mean, yeah, I can relate. I mean, last night was a tough night at home for whatever reason, just the high level of stress. The kids have been off for the holidays, so you're thrown out of your, and then all through the holidays, you're thinking, okay, the kids will be back to the school soon. Kids go back to school. Now my son's sick. He's back home, right? And you're navigating these. But the reason I give that example, although it's very relatable to parents, is to say that you thought we just got to get them back to school and then everything will be fine. And then you get them back to school and there's a new problem, right? And then. So to me, it's an awareness of that no one's immune, and you certainly feel that heat. And I know for me, I try to be more aware of it and correct it more quickly rather than dwelling on something for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and maybe a week or a month, and maybe dwelling on it for a half an hour, 15 minutes, or an hour. I remember a saying that I don't know if it's directly Michael Jordan or not, but I remember saying that he would take 15 minutes after every loss, and he would feel it, and he would feel it hard. But then once that 15 minutes was up, he would let it go and it would be on to the next one. And that's how I feel a little bit about problems, is to say, they can tell you some stuff that you don't know, that you're not good enough in a certain area, and they can give incredible feedback. But when you dwell within a problem, like there's a saying that's saying you don't find a solution to the problem within the problem. You find it outside of it. So being able to get outside your current circumstance or your current problem allows you to get into solution mode. So
that's good.
Well, you know what's funny about that?
That's really good.
Is I've been that. I've felt that. And you and I have had some dialogue as of late regarding a couple of the things that I'm working through. And immediately your third party is outside the problem.
yes.
There's clarity. There's strategy that was cloudy for me. And I think it's just because you've got some collaboration. And I'll just say, do I agree with you? 100%. But is it easy? No, it's not easy. When you're in it and you feel like it's kind of like snowballing, or it's kind of like, man, how do I at least stop digging? It's hard to say, well, okay, here's the problem. Let me step out beside it and let me try to organize some thoughts. I agree with you, but I can just, it's not easy.
Oh, it's not. And if you saw me last night, I'm not proud of how emotionally revved up I got and in my own head and about something that is very normal. Like, it's very normal. It's just my expectation was set in a way to expect me to not have problems by day X, by day Y, by Wednesday, and that everything would be better by Thursday and Friday, quote unquote better. But that's misaligned. And so I guess what I'm saying to your opening question is, what does it look like to know that you're going to have problems, right? That's the human experience. That's the development journey. And don't set those, in my mind, to me, I'm talking to myself, it's like, don't set those deadlines where you think like by Friday you're going to be good. No, like you're going to have some weekend things and you're going to have, they're just going to look different. And every level of your development, they're going to look different. And so, it's kind of like, don't wish you didn't have problems and don't expect to not have problems. It's just when you do get them, it does hurt, but it makes you pause and go, okay, that's a reminder. I knew I was going to have problems. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect this problem. I'll tell you that. I kind of wished I didn't have this problem, right? Which is the first reaction. But then, what control, what ownership do you have with that mindset? The mindset of, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better.
Don't wish for more. Don't wish for less problems. Wish for more skills.
There you go.
It's funny. Yeah. We had a call. You guys were on the call with Mike, our coach, and one of the things I'm focused on for the new year is drinking, right? And kind of controlling. Not that it's uncontrollable. I don't mean that, but it's like I want to be more in control of not drinking. He said, well, if you just don't think about not drinking and you work on working out more, the more you work out, which is outside the problem, to your point,
right?
Focus on working out. The more working out, the more reps I get, the more days in a row in the gym, the less likely I'm going to be to want to have a glass or a bottle of wine at night when I'm sitting there thinking about my problems.
There you go, right?
But I mean, but I guess that's your point, right? I'm thinking of
which, by the way, trying to solve the problem within the problem, say drinking is a perfect example.
Don't do that.
Drinking within the problem creates more problems. Right? Like it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
But and that's just a microcosm of trying to solve a problem within the problem is that you end up creating more problems.
I've never heard that before. That's really profound. I like that a lot. It's like you got to get outside of it. I dig that. Well, that's yeah. And I look at that like as even in like a career. Like if I just get this promotion, when I get this job, I'll be good.
I just need to make this money.
When I just make this money, I'll be good. If you're running a business, we just get to this revenue level, we're good. And I know I've been guilty of that multiple times. And the answer is, for the problem that you're talking about, you're 100% right.
Yep, that's right.
It's just you lack the wisdom, right? The wisdom that comes from contextualizing what's actually happening. It's not this one microcosm. You call it this one problem is the thing. It's just this game is riddled with challenges. Yeah. It's like playing a basketball game with no defender. Like that would be asinine. That wouldn't make sense.
Right.
But yet
that would be golf.
That would be golf. Tried them.
Just kidding.
Come on, man.
I've broken 100,
it wouldn't
5 times
be the
in my
same
life.
because I'd still beat you. If you don't have any defenders, I'm still going to win.
If I'm a defender on myself when I play golf.
I was going to say,
I don't need a defender.
I have rejected my own ball.
Who's moving the ball when I'm trying to swing at it?
Yeah, that's hilarious, man. That was good timing.
That was good time. We need the.
Yeah, good drum. But it is true though. Like for me, I'm like, if I just get to here, I won't have this problem anymore. And you're right. But you're going to inherently trade it up for a different challenge, right? Like so, it's hard to be broke. But if you do really well financially, that comes with other bigger problems, right? So they're both hard. It doesn't, it's subjective in nature, but like they come with different things. They come with different challenges. I'd rather level up the challenge, So it's almost like this reframing where I have to constantly remind, and we all came from the same school of thought through Jeff Olson, right? Like, you can determine the size of somebody's paycheck by the size of the problems that they're able to solve. You can decide, you can evaluate the size of the leader by the problems that they're able to solve. You could, there's a lot of derivatives to that saying, but I don't know about you guys, but I find myself having to continually resell myself on that because it's almost like, this is a philosophy. You just insert it, install it, and it just goes. And although maybe subconsciously that programming is there, I have to constantly remind myself that is the game because my human emotion kicks in all the time and reverts back to this old programming.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to talk about limiting beliefs, right? It's like when you're in it and you're not able to step outside the problem, then for me, at least lately, I've been thinking like, man, do I have any business doing these certain things? It's like all kinds of stuff has crept into my head, right? To your point. You've growth. I mean, growth is so vital. It's so vital when you're going through this.
Well, a nuance on the size of your paycheck will be determined by the size of your problem. I think people have heard that. I think Elon Musk has said that. But something I just thought of mine in a mix with Rocky, it's almost like the amount of problems that can come your way and you continue to keep going.
Right.
Right, you keep going through problem after problem and without a loss in enthusiasm about what you're doing because they're not going away and they seem to come at a higher and bigger velocity the higher level you go. Yep. And what you referenced about choose your hard, right? You can pick anything in life. Hey, look, it's hard being married. It's hard not being married. It's hard having kids. It's hard not having kids. Mm-hmm. It's hard being broke. It's hard having money, right? It just depends on kind of, we bought a piece of real estate a couple years back, right? And we're proud of it. And then all of a sudden we're dealing with stuff with this piece of real estate. Shocker, right? Right? It doesn't feel good. It's very inconvenient. We're frustrated about it. But I think if you were looking at it objectively, you go, that makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't feel that way in the moment.
It's hard dealing with property issues. It's hard paying rent with nothing in return.
That's right. How about it's hard not having clients. It's hard having a lot of clients, right? And you could say the same thing with team members, employees, whatever you want to say.
I was just going to talk about team members too. Yeah,
it's and that's a lot of reasons people don't. Right, you hear that a lot,
and you think about our position, and this is the hierarchy, right? It's like to our entry level person that sees a lot of problems, we look at that and go, "Oh man, that's not a problem. We've worked through that. Right. You've got to work through that now to realize this is really not that big of a deal." Then you get to a little bit senior. And that list of problems changes, and the people are like, "Oh my God, I got these problems. And we're looking at it going, "No, you really don't, right? Because we've worked through that." So it's like there's equity there for people to borrow from.
That's so important, man, because he just articulated the entire process. And whatever is playing in my head right now of I got to solve this, I got to solve this, I got to solve this. I'm not good enough. Am I good enough?
Right.
What happens if I'm not capable of solving it? What happens if I can't solve it? All of this stuff that you think is unique to you, but everybody's having the same conversation. I mean, I think everybody's having the same conversations in their head, and the process looks the same. It's just inserted with a bigger severity of challenge.
Yeah.
And so it's like almost, I ask myself the question of like, if the person or me, after I get through this, am I going to have the same level of concern when it happens again? Right. And I think any logical person who's been through this would say, no. Once you've dealt with it a couple times, it becomes easier because you know what to expect. There's no surprises. That right there is a good enough reason. And you know it's going to be okay. Right.
Sure.
And how do you do that when you're dealing with something where your human emotion is telling you, I don't know if it's going to be okay. And I've never dealt with this before. And inherently, it's still it's still uncertain.
The first thing that comes to mind is mentorship. Finding somebody that's been to the mountain that you want to climb and been to the mountaintop. And that can go both ways. I remember getting a call. This was probably 2 months ago, and it was one of our team members, and they started off the conversation with, "Hey, I got a big problem," right? And immediately I go to what I perceive as a big problem. I'm like, "Oh man, this isn't going to be fun to hear." And the bottom line is that he forgot to, it was going to be like $250 or $500 more a year for a customer on like a $5,000 auto policy because it wasn't rated exactly how it needed to be rated. I mean, it was a very, what I would perceive of like, dude, this isn't even, this is just a conversation to potentially even resell the client on why he wants to have it right, and gain goodwill rather than you apologizing, right? This is not, to me, even on the spectrum of problems, but to him, it was a big problem.
You went sigh of relief.
Oh yeah, I immediately.
And he's going anxious, or he or she.
It's a huge deal, and I don't think it's not to make fun of that, because the problems that we're dealing with, somebody else would look at us and be like,
"It's all good."
Are you kidding? Right? Yeah. So I think being able to, like you say, backcast, like project out in the future, your future self and where you want to go, or somebody that you're modeling that has already been where you want to go, and say, hey, how would they deal with this problem? I wonder what they would want to learn from this. How would I learn from this? If I was going to look back at this, what could I focus on right now that would, I'd be proud of in the future? Something of that nature. Just makes a lot of sense to kind of help get over that feeling of, oh my gosh, this is a big problem.
So what you're saying is backcast, meaning go back in my bank of problems that I've solved in the past. Remember how I felt when I dealt with that for the first time and that I overcame it. And now that that's not a big problem, take that same perspective and implant it into the problem that I'm dealing with today.
And I think you add an element to that. How did I feel in the face of that problem? Right. What did I feel like? Because that person's probably feeling it before you. Then you said get to how I felt when I handled it.
Yeah.
First of all, how did I feel in the face of that problem?
And to your point,
there's your empathy.
The mentorship is important because it's almost as if they put us at ease.
Right.
If you're around somebody who's already been,
they bring certainty to an uncertain issue.
There you go.
And that's where, because if you don't have certainty and you have no foundation of certainty, it's debilitating. It's counterproductive. No
question.
But if you can borrow a little bit of certainty, and another thing, that's that end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. Everything's not a big deal because there's kids starving in third world countries and you're complaining, how dare you perceive this as a problem because there's bigger problems in the world. I also think you miss the opportunity to learn something, and I don't think that's an effective way to deal with
That's almost
problems.
probably a defense mechanism, though, right? Like that's somebody, like they don't really want to wrestle with the challenge at hand, or this is my
and they don't want to address it.
They don't want to address it, and that's a way of artificially de-escalating the importance of it,
right? Or they'll dodge it. They won't deal with it. You see that all the time is problem avoidance. Say if somebody did something wrong, or there's an opportunity for you to make something right or take ownership, but you have somebody who just won't answer the phone call. They'll just dodge them because they don't want to address it. So they'll just pretend the problem doesn't exist. They'll put their head in the sand, and that's another way. It's a terrible way to deal with.
Well, and I think too, I agree with that. I think too, the idea of problems and how do you feel in the face of them, and I think this runs very parallel to mistakes. Right? You think about mistakes that people make. Right? Like why do we encourage mistakes? Because we know that, number one, someone's going to learn something.
Why do we fall, Bruce?
Number two, we know if they're going to learn something, they probably won't make the mistake again.
Right.
So then you start talking about problems and offshoots from a mistake, and you're giving someone a whole quiver full of arrows that are going to be able to handle problems based around mistakes that could be made.
Right. Well, and there's also, not to get into the word mistake, but I also, for some reason, as we're talking about this, your intent matters, right? There's different types of errors, and an intent error and mistake, it's hard to get behind, right? Like that's like if you're trying to, I'm just making some up, you're trying to screw somebody over and then you get caught, right? That's different than you making a good, honest mistake of not having the correct date of birth on an application. You had the spouse's date of birth mixed up in insurance or something like that. Oh my gosh, yeah, so sorry, let me get that initial, let me take care of that. Whatever it is, and then there's a level of I'm gonna pay more attention to detail, and I'm gonna own that, or whatever it is. So there's nuances,
which
to
is
this.
funny though, because let's just talk insurance here for a second. So almost, I'm sure every insurance professional listening is like, oh my God, I can't believe you're gonna go there. We don't ever make mistakes, right? E&O tells us we don't make mistakes. We can never admit fault. It's like it's almost counterintuitive or contradictory in nature to be able to own situations that happen that maybe shouldn't have happened. It's like we're taught and we're conditioned from a legal standpoint. You can't ever admit fault no matter what. And it's like, I get it. There are legal situations that come up, and there's an important line there in regards to situations that occur that could be, big deals. But simple, small stuff like that, I've just seen a lot of agents in general in our business make little mistakes. And they're conditioned to not own anything or deal with it.
Well, and they also like these. What you're talking about mistakes, that there's not even damage, right? They're not talking about when somebody's hurt or damaged or there's even a legal situation, but it's just an opportunity to take ownership and correct it on behalf.
It's extremely frustrating for a customer. I think it's extremely frustrating with a relationship. I think it's extremely damaging to the development of the actual person who's doing it. And so it is. I think it's a real challenge. Specifically, probably not just our industries. It's probably a lot of professionals. I'm sure it's medical. I'm sure it's mortgages. I'm sure it's real estate. It's tough because it's like you go to these education seminars and they tell you don't ever say sorry for anything. You don't do anything wrong. Just so we're clear on that. And it's like, okay, what world do you live in? Right. That's not how humans interact with each other, and that's not how you grow.
And that may be the external company line, right? I think about sometimes athletes after games, sometimes it's counterproductive to say how they really feel because that's going to give bulletin board material to the other team, or that's going to cause a stir that's going to be distracting in the media for the team. But internally, make no mistake that if you made a mistake on the last play and you didn't execute the play and you've cost your team the game, and you come in there and you go, man, I really don't see anything wrong with what I did. That's not okay. Yeah. That is not a team that's going to get better. That's not a person that's going to get better. If you want to tell the media that, it was a team loss or whatever it is, that's one thing.
I like that.
But internally, when you reflect and you look in the mirror and you're working with a teammate and you know damn well that you didn't execute the play right and you didn't get the shot you wanted, whatever it may be, and that may be a bad example, that's
I think it's a great example.
I think it's a great example
because to me, that's the next thing I wanted to ask you guys is just like that, the component of awareness. You have to have an awareness that it didn't go the way that you would like it to go, and that there might be a likelihood or a possibility that you had some sort of part in that not going the way that you want to, right? It's like living at cause instead of at effect. Like if you live at cause, meaning I have a lot of say in how these things go, and when you have a high amount of awareness, the tough part is you start to notice that there's a lot of things you need to work on. So it's extremely painful. It's actually very uncomfortable when you have a high level of awareness because you realize that there's a lot of stuff to work on. When you don't have an awareness and you don't recognize that you didn't run the play the way that you're supposed to run the play, it's easier because you don't have anything to work on. Yeah. I don't have anything to reflect on. And this journey of personal development and personal growth, man, it's hard. It's hard because I don't know about you guys, but I feel more aware of deficiencies than I ever have been.
No question.
And I don't necessarily enjoy that feeling,
Well, without the proper philosophy, it would incentivize you to stop, right? Well, then fine. Then why are you trying to go to the next level?
How do you mean without proper philosophy? Explain that.
Because if you keep leveling up, and the higher you go, you're dealing with more and bigger problems that make you personally uncomfortable because you haven't yet solved them because you're not that person yet. Then you could just as easily go, you know what, then let's not do that new thing. Let's not go into a new market. Let's not hire that new team member because that's going to require growth from me. And I know exactly what to do at 1 million in revenue, 5 million in revenue. So I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what to expect to stay here. And I'm not saying that's a good philosophy because that has its own boatloads of secondary consequences. Just my point is that it takes that mindset in that moment to perceive that discomfort and that problem as, okay, maybe this is an indication that I'm on the right track to go where I said I want to go. Right. And if you don't have that framing, I feel like it's really, really, really easy to just stop and retract to think that comfort is going to be what's going to solve that pain.
Or what's going to make you fulfilled, which it's not.
Which it's not.
And so you have the framing and the philosophy to frame up the situations that are happening and why they're working for you instead of working against you. But then you have the reinforcement from environment, being around the right people who are doing the same thing. You have the mentorship that steps in and says, hey, this is going to be okay, that provides certainty when it's uncertain. And then probably just the surrendering to the fact that this game is going to be uncomfortable no matter what.
That's right.
That's kind of where I'm at, is to say, like, dude, this is the game. You're either okay with that or you're not. And, humility is the word that sticks out to me more than anything. It's like, I feel like the more progression in personal development, I'm hoping the more humility I gain, because humility to me is the only retreat away from the enormous pain that comes from not being good enough, right? Because if you're coming in, for me, if I look at it, if I'm inherently always going to be stretching to the next level, then I'm inherently always going to be reaching, and I'm always not good enough, right? So that's just part of the game. So to me, that's an inherent humility that says, cool, that's just the game. But if we're getting to the point where it's like, I just got to get good enough, and then you think you're good enough, that just creates, it's like almost like, I don't know, it's a Buddhist teaching of like expectations causes suffering. It's like your expectation is that I'm developed enough to not have these problems.
Yeah.
And then you run into this friction of
Buckle
like
up.
your expectations are causing a significant disconnect. And then you go, what's wrong with me? You know, and to me, that creates ultimate suffering, where if you have a humility that says, well, no matter how good I get, no matter how many books I read, no matter how many seminars, no matter how many problems I conquer, no matter what position I get, no matter what level, you know, I hope to get to, inherently, I'm always going to be left unfinished, right? Like,
Amen.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable.
And I think the development and progression, to your point, for me personally, I feel like I'm more humbled. I think that's what you're saying. The more progress I experience personally, the more I'm aware of how I'm not as good as I think I am.
Yep.
Because you're so aware of all the things that you're trying to do that you're like, sometimes you ever sit down and do something, you're like, this is taking me way too long. I should know how to do this. I did that the other day. I'm trying to send this communication internally to the team and mirror it with a text message. And it took me like an hour and a half. And I was like embarrassed. I'm like, why is this taking me so long? But it's just because I hadn't done it enough, where it wasn't just as simple as something I've already done. So in that moment, I'm frustrated. I'm feeling all this stuff. When in reality, it was like, oh, okay, well, now I know. You know, now the next time I do it, it's going to take me half the time. Then the next time I do it, it's going to take me quarter of the time. And then I'll be able to teach somebody eventually, and I won't have to do it at all. Right? That's the curiosity.
I love what you just said, because I was going to interject of like, I don't want it to come out the wrong way. It's like you use the word humility, right? Humility is like one of those words where you're like, it's a badge of honor to be humble. I would almost interject and say it's like embarrassment is a better word, because embarrassment is how I feel a lot of times, you know, because humble's like, everybody wants to be humble, right? But humbled to me means, no, you left the day and you're embarrassed.
There's egg on your face.
Like, it's not a badge of honor. Like it is in the macro, if you understand the game, but it doesn't feel like it when the situation's happening. It's an embarrassment. And so when people say, oh, I'm humbled, it's like, okay, well, that seems like that might feel good, you know? Like, no, I feel ridiculously embarrassed, you know? And how do you get comfortable with just being embarrassed all the time, you know? I mean, to me, that's a superpower. To me, that's the skill, you know? It's like, and I think maybe some of it is, you know, get over yourself a little bit, right? Like, and that's easier said than done, but, you know, knowing and getting comfortable with the fact of like, it's not about you, you know, I think is a cool exploration.
Yeah, and entrepreneurship, there's that threat, right? There's that threat that you do think it's about you.
Sure.
And you do think
I think any achievement.
Yeah, I think you think you said it to start the call with the example with Panera and how you're kind of
A space
making
cadet?
fun of yourself, right? And you talked about, I don't know how I got to this point in my life by doing things like that, right? It's like, no, you got to this point in your life in spite of all those deficits, right? Like, it's not because of you, right? It's like, that's an interesting shift for me, that we're all just riddled with flaws. And it's not necessarily like you got where you are because of you. It's just you've gotten where you are. And even in spite of all these things that are not quote unquote perfect, right? That's just an interesting shift.
I think
Which
of
that
like
gives you stuff to work on, right?
It's like it's almost to that point. It's like here's the imperfections, and I'm just going to stay in the game. If I'm going to find a way to stay in the game,
Dude, that's
right?
profound. Yeah,
You know,
man.
I'm going to find a way to stay in the game. I mean, I'm embarrassed. I'm humbled. Call it what you want to call it.
Right.
But I ain't quitting.
Yeah.
Right. I'll take the shots I got to take. I'll receive. I'll receive the shots I've got to take.
Yeah.
I'll stand up in the face of embarrassment.
Yep.
Say what you want to say. Where a lot of people, you talk about retreating, you know, and not handling it. I don't want to do that.
Well, maybe
I
that's
I think we've done that. I think we've all done that before in our past, in our lives. But
yeah.
versus, you know, the opposite of saying, hey, I just don't want to deal with this, is standing there and going, go ahead, give it to me. I got it coming, you know.
Yeah.
And then
Maybe that's the key, dude.
But realizing I'm staying in this game.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the underlining attribute that is consistent among this whole journey, is to say the staying in the game part is the hardest part. And it might not mean that you quit what you're doing. It might be that you quit reaching for the next level, right? Like that's what you're saying, Taylor. It's like you don't have to quit. You don't have to switch industries. You don't have to quit jobs. You don't have to, retire from your career, but maybe you quit trying to get out of your comfort zone to do the new things. And I think that happens. I think that happens all the time. I feel that, right? Like,
I just saw a post in one of these insurance agent message boards last night. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was an agent that got to a certain point. And basically what he was acknowledging publicly is that he got to a certain point and he's very comfortable.
Yep.
And it's almost like he's lost the understanding of why would I go to the next level when this is what I'm facing with. I don't know if you felt the same way about the post. And I saw it and I go, gosh, that's so interesting at face value. But then you're one circumstance away from debilitating your complete business. I mean, I'm just saying all your business relies on you. What happens if something happens to you? You don't have a business, right? Like, so maybe getting past a certain point in your business gives you the leverage to give yourself some space that if something that is not all reliant upon you, and then there's leverage in that. So there's these threats to think that like, but you don't know that because you don't have the whole picture. So again, I think that is trying.
Well, you talk about development in that scenario. It's like if you're developed enough to get it to the level of that post, and I remember it, and you say, I'm good, I'm comfortable here.
Right.
You're retreating to the fact that if I want to go anymore, or if I've got to enterprise this to a degree that I'm not necessarily comfortable with or familiar with, I'm not ready to do that yet. I'm going to stay where I'm at.
And it was almost like he was seeking permission to stay where he was.
Yes.
That's what it seemed like. He was seeking validation to say, hey, am I right? Can somebody just say that I'm right and I'm good?
Yeah.
And what's very interesting is that if you polled a group of 100 people, you may have a 50-50 split to say, you know what, you're right, man. You're making enough money. Who are you to go after more? You know, just chill. Don't get an office space. That's expensive. Don't hire people because you're just going to have problems. And then you might have a few people that go, no, man, let me tell you something. Let me ask you a question. Let me tell you a story. Let me see what you want out of this. And then let's talk about whether you want to go next level. Let me give you a point, maybe a vantage point that you're not looking through. So it's like very careful who that mentor is. Very careful on who you seek advice from. Because in a moment of a problem, in a moment of discomfort, sometimes somebody will just say what they want to say to get you out of pain. Hey, Brett, I don't like to see you in pain, man. Why don't you just don't answer the phone, man. Don't deal with it.
You're fine.
Yeah, is that good advice?
Well,
right?
Just because you talk about that, and you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of when you have a problem, everybody's an expert to solve it, right? But think about who you're employing to solve. If you listen to those people that have never solved that problem for their own benefit or sake or sanity or business or whatever, but they're an expert on your problem and telling you how to solve it.
Be careful of those. That's the litmus test.
Be careful.
Have they done it themselves?
Right.
Do they it was like what keeps coming back to me. Everyone's perspective and opinion is important, but they're not all weighted the same. Yeah. Yes. I'm not going to listen to you if I can see, I'm going to listen to you, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to weight it very heavily if you have no context of the problem. You've never solved it yourself. You've never known somebody to solve it yourself. Right. So in those times, I think it's a dangerous situation in those moments of problem is who you seek that counsel from.
I think about two things on that. I think you could obviously, and that's a good example. There's 100 different examples like that. But like I think about, you could logically justify why it would make sense to go to the next level, right? Like that's easy, right? You can come up with a reason, but maybe that's where you want to be. That's okay. But then it relates me back to the problem of like, well, what were you doing this in the first place for? Mm-hmm. What's your reason and what's your reason that you're linking to going to the next level? If you're inherently doing it because you love the process of the friction, if you're inherently doing it because this game is about growth and this game is about development and to see how far you can push it because it's to see what your limits are and to see how good you can get, which is like every great achievement I think of sports, like that's why they do it, right? There's just this innate, inherent thing that many of us want to see how far we can push it. If that's your frame, and you've related that as your driver, it's so much easier to deal with the challenges when they come. It's so much easier to deal with the plateaus. It's so much easier to deal with the discomfort of when you get to another level, you have to completely reinvent yourself to get to the next one, which is very painful. But if that's the mission, if that's the driver, if that's the reason you're actually in the game, you spend way less time second guessing it because that's the reason that you're dealing with it. I think about like just our mission of creating extraordinary lives. Like, we're very lucky in the sense of like it's embedded into the entire function of our entire business. Mm-hmm. But if it's not, I think I would have a lot more question marks about, is this worth it? Do I want to do this? can I do this? You know, like real questions instead of like in the moment of like, poor pitiful me, I'm going to take 5 minutes because I'm going to feel sorry for myself, right? And then I'm going to come back to the game. So I think for that, to me, is like, what do those challenges, what do those problems mean? Are you in love with the result, or are you in love with the process? And it's way harder to be in love with the process because the process is painful. The process is in the gym lifting the weights. The process is getting up early and running the sprints. The process is the off season when people aren't looking. And if you look at all the greats that you study and that we thrive on and that we study and we follow and we idolize, they loved the process.
Well, and also, how do you celebrate yourself in the process? I think when you talk about a little bit of a hacks, right? There's no shortcut to the process. It's a long game. We understand that. But I used to not understand that. Like, what do you mean? Like, I want the result. Like, I want to look good. That's why I work out, right? Like, I don't want to go to the gym and sit there and not get the result. But it's the shift in mindset of, like, when you do something hard, right, or you solve a problem, when you have egg on your face and you pick up the phone and you face the music and you talk to that customer and you level with them and you take ownership, there are opportunities to reward yourself and your circle to reward you, to say, wow, you just leveled up. Dude. And they're like, what do you mean, man?
That's such a good subtlety that you just
miss. Leveled up, man.
Yeah.
You just went to the next level because of your ability to take a next step in the face of adversity. Yeah. But and so there's part of that you can celebrate yourself within the process. If you just started a workout program and you're at the end of the day and you didn't feel like working out, but you went to the gym and you lifted a weight, great. Find a way to reward yourself in the meantime that makes you condition yourself in that process, because that's not easy.
So, dude, I hope, man, this is so valuable, because that right there to me is the game. And for me, I could just tell you that my journey specifically, I don't know you guys, but like, I feel so much more self-worth and self-love and confidence when I'm in the process. And I wrote my goals this year, and one of the reasons it says, why do you want to achieve this goal? And it forces you to really think about that. And to me, it's self-worth, it's self-confidence, it's the feeling of feeling good about myself, right? And I think so much of unhappiness comes from you just don't feel good about yourself. And if you look at people that I look at that are happy, they're content, they're comfortable, they're happy with themselves. Very seldom has to do with external situation. It has to do with this internal music that they have. And I'm constantly pursuing that for me. So when I put it down on paper, it was realization to me that's like, man, all the external stuff is fun because you can actually objectify it. But what am I after? I'm after a feeling. Like, I'm after this feeling of I feel good about myself, you know? And I know that I don't think it's talked about at all. Like, nobody says that.
Isn't that ironic, though, that content is found in the pursuit? That's because that's what I hear.
I'm content after I finish the workout and I feel good about myself. And it's this brief moment. But here's the key that I think is important that I'm learning is that if you don't have enough awareness to take the moment to acknowledge it, you'll never know it exists. If you don't get done with a workout like you said, and for me, the reward is that 5 minutes afterwards, like we lay on the floor and we meditate right after the workouts on Tuesday, Wednesday. If I don't take that moment and acknowledge what just happened, I would have missed it. I'll be on to the next problem. I'll be on to the next text message. I'll be on to the next challenge. I'll be on to the next fire drill. So that simple space of acknowledgement of what you just did and the feeling you get and checking in like how your body feels after you do something like that hard call, to me reinforces me wanting to do something.
Do more of it.
Yeah.
It's a leadership tip too, man. It's a leadership tip, because when you see somebody working through, how about a new marketer, right? A new sales professional, and they make a call that's so bad that you're like, wow, this is worse than I thought, right? But in your reality, they made the call.
That's right.
And yesterday, they weren't making the calls. So there's an opportunity as a leader and as a teammate to go, man.
Reaffirm that.
Good for you. What do you mean good for me, man? It was like one of the worst calls. Maybe, but you'll never be that bad again. But congratulations on going to the next level of, because yesterday you weren't making that call. Now you're making that call.
Wow.
And that's why I think this support system, when I think about.
The reps count. All the reps count.
And I think about my journey selfishly, you guys have been so much of that for me, that in those woe is me, what am I doing matters, what am I, I'm not good enough matters. One of you guys or both of you are able to shed just a little light to say, hey, dude, congratulations, man. Good for you. You know, not in a way that's not authentic.
Ditto.
Not that it's BS, but it's just a little bit of a light.
Yep.
You know,
it's outside the problem.
It's harder to do it when you're by yourself.
It's outside the problem, right? I mean, it's You say that, I could say the same thing about you guys. I mean, at different times over the last 15, 16, 17 years, there have been plenty of times where I'm sitting in it and your perspective outside of it is something that lifts me up and helps.
How about this? You know, you have so many people, insurance agents, business owners, it's a lonely life, right? It's a lonely life because I can't relate. And sometimes you will have conversations about partnership. We believe in partnership, right? We're 33rd and a third apiece. We're equal partners. We've been very public and transparent about how we handle that and how it's been great for us. It's not for everyone. But then you have some people who goes, well, it doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't make sense for me to give up ownership or give up equity or allow somebody to buy in or whatever it is. And that may be, right? That's for you to make a decision. But at what cost, right? Because in those moments where you're faced with a problem that is a bigger, than you know how to handle, in every single contextual situation that we're talking about, do you quit? Do you detract? Do you stop growing? Because you don't have that support system that's in the boat with you rowing. And that's something to consider for all those people that are going it alone.
It's funny. You said something earlier. I forget. One of you were saying something earlier. And all I could think about in my head was, thank God there's three of us.
Well, think about it. What you just said of being outside the problem. Every problem that you're dealing with, you have two people that are outside of it being able to solve it. Yep. Every problem that you're dealing with, you have two people that's outside of solving it. Every problem that I'm dealing with, there's two people outside of it that are willing to solve it. We're going away tomorrow at the Brownwater Ranch. Shout out to Rodney. And we're sitting there and we're going to watch the sun come up with a fire. And we're going to talk about all the challenges and the problems that are happening in our lives and our business. And then we're going to prioritize them. We're going to talk about them. And we're going to map out a strategy to overcome them together. Like, you tell me, if you looked at partnership just from a financial standpoint, first of all, but it does show up in a financial way for sure. But it's almost like you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies because you can't quantify what's going to happen tomorrow until 24 months down the road. And then you're going to be like, man, I wonder what it was. And you're going to go, it doesn't work that way. You know, it doesn't work that way. So putting yourself with people who have been there before, or even if they haven't been there before but are able to see things that you don't see that are outside the problem, that's a really cool perspective that I think I would take away from this conversation.
Yeah, and that's why people work with a coach. That's why people work with financial advisors. It's not that that there's not mutual funds. There's not that there's not index funds that are available to you to do your own investments. It's for the moments that you're going to be shook and emotional, that you have somebody that is outside of the problem that is going to be able to give you solid counsel that's been to the mountain to equip you to make the best decision at that time. Because we all know that the biggest gains and the biggest losses come from those decisions, right? The market's it's a good example because it's very objective. To get out of a market at the wrong time can cost you 6, 7, 8, 9 years of loss, right? Versus it might just be that little bit of a coaching that allows you to stay in the market, stay invested, to get closer towards your goal.
And reap the rewards of the 5 years prior that you've been planting seeds on. And why is the financial markets any different than our own personal development? Yep. How are the financial markets any different than our own personal growth, our own career path? Yep. You might have been planting seeds for 5 years in a career, and at the moment where you're challenged the most in the face of the biggest problem, if you abandon ship, you lose the whole 5 years of the seeds that you planted.
But Brett, it goes up and down. It's volatile. Yes.
So stay in the game.
Just
because
like Rod said, over a long period of time, right?
It's not
problems work for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Cool. Good.
Thank God we have problems.
Thank God we have problems. All right, well, let's go solve a bunch of them.
Let's go make some new ones.
Let's go create some new ones,
guys.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you know anybody with some problems, you should share this podcast with them. And if you need us to take on some of those problems, we got plenty of problems for them.
Now's your time. Now's your time. I got heavy. I got room on my shoulders right now.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate it. You guys have an amazing week, and remember, be extraordinary.
Yes, sir.